What is the 7mm Backcountry Cartridge? Well, folks, I think it's the one that has destroyed the saying that there's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, this one's new.
This one's pretty new, and it's unique because it operates at 80,000 psi
That's
internal
what's new.
pressure. Folks, I'm here with my good friend Ron Spomer, and we are going to talk about the 7mm Backcountry Cartridge and its performance in the field. Thanks for coming on the show, my friend.
Always my pleasure, Joseph.
We have a
pretty
good
excited
time.
about?
I kind of am.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I'm a traditionalist at heart, a
Sure.
purist. I grew up with a dad that believed anything designed after 1895 was worthless as a rifle or a cartridge.
Yeah, I have lots of viewers like that.
Oh, bless him, right? So I've still got a big, strong, bit of that in my own soul. But I also do really love and appreciate innovation that's really significant.
This is significant.
Yeah, it's very different. So it's rooted in military technology, really,
Yeah,
where
it
they've gone to using a stronger cartridge case to contain more pressure, with the result that they can push bullets faster.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, the 7mm Backcountry Cartridge uses a parent case that's made out of steel. It's a peak alloy, which is a proprietary material that Federal has come up with. That means you can use a cartridge that's no bigger than the traditional 30-06, and yet it's performing with or past all of the big 7mm magnums in terms of velocity, minimal wind drift, downrange energy, all that good stuff. And it's optimized for use with these high BC bullets, like this 170 grain terminal ascent right here. Factory ammo is additionally being loaded with 195 grain Berger Elite Hunters. That thing is a missile. How about, and that has a BC of 0.755.
Wow.
Really high. This one's in the mid sixes, 6.5, something like that.
Or something, yeah.
And then you've got the 168 grain Barnes LRX that's being factory loaded as well. That's a great bullet for use on really big game like moose and bison and so forth, stubborn elk. And then 155 grain terminal ascents as well, which can be pushed really fast from this cartridge. And then this one right here, this is another factory loaded cartridge. That's going to be the so-called economy load, right? 175 grain tipped fusion bullet. Fantastic for deer up to elk size game, I would say. Pretty high BC, and it'll cost a bit less than the other loads. Now, it's worth noting, none of these should be extremely expensive. Federal's told me they're going to sell 7mm backcountry ammo for about the same price as 7PRC ammo loaded with similar quality bullets.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that's more than fair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you're going to get the same velocity or more,
Or more, yeah.
depending on your barrel length.
Let's throw out a few numbers just briefly, and I like using this 155 grain terminal ascent because it's loaded in factory ammo by Federal in all the big 7MMs and including the 280 Ackley, 7PRC, 7 Rem Mag, and 28 Nosler. In a 24-inch barrel, the 7mm Backcountry even outstrips the 28 Nosler. In a 20-inch barrel, it outstrips the 280 Ackley and maybe even the 7 Rem Mag, and it's neck and neck with the 7 PRC and right there with the 28
But
Nosler
that's
as
with
well.
those other ones still in a 24-inch
Yeah.
barrel. Yeah.
Isn't
so
that
you got
cool?
a 20-inch barrel against a 24-inch barrel, and that's where this thing really shines.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to have, it's 200 feet per second faster in the same barrel length. We're kind of used to that stuff with the new Magnum cartridges.
Right.
But to get this in a 30-06 size case and then in a 20-inch barrel,
Yeah.
now you're putting a suppressor out front and you don't have that super long rifle. This is the big
And
deal.
what about capacity? All of the traditional 7 Magnums, you get 3 in the magazine.
Yep. Now here you're going to get 4 or 5.
That's right.
Depending on that particular rifle. Of course, you don't need that many. One's plenty, but
we all hope to kill with one shot cleanly, right? But all of us are human, and every animal is individual. And some of them just, how did the pirate say it? Decline to acquiesce to our request when we shoot them with one shot. And sometimes you need follow-ups, folks. What about that alloy case? What have you learned about that, and how does it handle 80,000 psi?
Well, according to Federal, they have got kind of a proprietary steel case that somehow magically not only contains all of that 80,000 psi's of pressure, but it stretches adequately to seal the chamber and the bore. That was the problem with that 277 Fury that Sig Sauer came out with. They have to use the two-piece case. They have the steel head so they don't blow out their primer pockets and overly stretch and whatever, but then they had to put brass in the front of it. So they got two different materials.
So it would seal the chamber.
Exactly,
Yeah.
to seal the chamber. But somehow they've got this steel, what are they calling it?
Peak alloy.
Peak alloy, and they told me that this stuff is used in the building of nuclear reactors.
Really?
This thing might even glow in the dark.
Ooh.
I don't know.
So you got a flashlight and
And you can start a fire with it too.
a beacon. What about these really heavy bullets? Do you think they're an advantage in a 7mm cartridge?
Well, they can be if you want to do long-range shooting. And as you know, I generally don't in my hunting, and I've done a lot of hunting, taken my game without needing to take 700-yard shots
Yeah.
or farther, or 600-yard shots. I think I've maybe taken one shot that was farther than 500 yards, and I haven't taken very many that were even 500. Most of my game comes inside of 300. A few things have been stretched out to 450. And once you get over 300 yards, you start to get some significant advantages with those higher BC bullets.
Yeah.
Not so much for your drops, but your wind deflections. And this is what usually gets us in the field. We just can't predict how fast that wind is blowing over the entire course of that bullet's flight. So if you have a bullet that minimizes its time in the air, gets to the target faster, it's less affected by the wind deflection, better chance of making a hit.
Sure. And because they're maintaining more velocity downrange, they hit harder.
Yeah, they retain more energy.
They mushroom more effectively and more reliably.
Looks like you've got a little mushroom right here.
I do, yeah. And that one was pulled from an Aoudad, a big ram, the biggest one I've shot, and that I took at 286 yards in Texas almost a year ago. It's February 2024. We were learning about and working out this new prototype cartridge from Federal, right? And I was really impressed with the performance. Here's the rifle itself. This was built by Proof Research. They were in on the project early on. You can see it's got a 20-inch barrel, and that 170 grain terminal ascent out of this 20-inch barrel is factory rated to go 3,000 feet per second. It's actually averaging right at 3,030 in this rifle, which is kind of awesome. It's not very common that actual velocity actually
exceeds the
exceeds.
factory. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the truth.
It averaged, I've shot a lot of 3-shot groups with it. You can average them all up at 100 yards. They average 0.85 inch, which is pretty dang good for factory ammo in an ultra lightweight rifle. Shoots really well. Recoil is pretty mild. My daughter Sophie is 11. She shot this, said, that doesn't kick bad. I can handle that. And went and killed the first black bear ever taken with a 7 backcountry.
Wow.
In Alaska.
11-year-old girl.
A whopper
Amazing.
of a black coastal black bear. And the next day she turned 12 on the boat. Just awesome, like pre-birthday present.
Yeah.
So I have some emotion invested in this cartridge.
The birthday bear.
I suppose. Yeah, that beautiful mushroom right there is from the
that bear?
Aoudad.
No, that's from the Aoudad.
Aoudad I shot. She shot her bear at 251 yards, broadside, center punch, both shoulders. He went whoom in a quivering heap. She ran that bolt like a champion, hit him again like I told her to because I didn't want her bear to get up and run away.
Yeah.
We practiced and talked through this, right? And he just never moved again. It was awesome.
Well, her performance was awesome. She
Yeah.
sort of overwhelms the cartridge here. She's the big star of the show.
She's the
not
star in
cartridge.
my opinion, yeah.
Oh, I
But-
agree.
So that bullet hit my Aoudad, 186 yards, quartering to right on the front of his shoulder. Tucked it right behind the bone, so it didn't hit that big knuckle bone. He was above me, so I was shooting up at him. And we found that bullet almost back at his hip. It was behind the rearmost ribs there. And it had gone, I think we charted nearly 30 inches.
Nearly 30, yeah.
And yeah, came to rest against the skin right there. He just dashed into the brush below and died right there. And then the next day, I was fortunate enough to go along with my friend Adam Heggenstaller.
I know Adam.
You know Adam?
Yeah, pretty good guy.
He's a fantastic guy.
Yeah.
Yep, he's the editorial director for Game and Fish magazines. Anyway, we were on this hunt together, and I got to go along with him because they had found a big ram. He ended up going 32 plus.
Whoa!
Yeah, big aoudad ram. But they couldn't get to him the day before, and we spent most of the next morning getting in position. Long stalk, big climb up the rocks, absolutely perfect. You know, they call the aoudad the poor man's desert bighorn, and I love hunting them. And I remember he was laying on this little narrow rock ledge where he could lay out prone on his bipod, and his sheep was above him across the canyon at 391 yards, and just feeding slowly. And he got real steady. We studied the wind a little bit just to make sure there was almost nothing, and what there was double vector, so it's kind of canceling itself out. And I've got video of this. I'll plug it in for those of us on YouTube here, but I said, I think I just hold right on the money and go. And he goes off his shot, hit it squarely through both shoulders. And that ram just, like that big bear did, just poof in his tracks and then boom, boom, boom down that mountain.
Downhill,
and slid underneath a big, I think it was a manzanita. And we couldn't see it anymore. So we took a good mental lock on it, went over there and found it, and dead as a doornail. And his bullet, if I remember right, had passed through as well. So this is the only one we've recovered so far.
Now, which bullet was it?
That was the 170 grain terminal ascent. So real long, sleek bullet. The rear half is all copper, so they can't fragment into nothing. The front half is a lead core bonded into the jacket. I think have you used these bullets?
I've never used them on game. I've shot them quite a bit on targets just to see how well they performed, and the accuracy is more than good enough.
Yeah.
But I just haven't taken any game with them yet, but that is a good-looking bullet.
It is. In my experience, it's the most predictable of all the hunting bullets on the market. And I had the good fortune to go to Africa with a PH friend of mine on a pure bullet testing excursion a few years ago using 200 grain versions of that in a 300 Win Mag. And I had a rifle actually built for the project. It needed to be really accurate because our directive was to try and prove out this bullet's claim that it works from the muzzle to as far as the ways you can hit something. And I don't promote doing this at all, but we were prepared. We had, like I said, kind of a directive, almost a journalistic obligation to test this bullet as far out as we could. And so we reached further and further. And with that bullet, 200 grain, 30 caliber out of a 300 Win Mag, shooting tiny groups out of this custom rifle, I shot oryx bulls with it, management bulls, no trophy stuff, just big old bulls, from 15 yards to, and I hesitate to admit it, 993 yards.
Don't admit it.
Killed them all dead. And we recovered bullets across that spectrum. The one that I shot the bull with at 15 yards, hit him on that shoulder. We found that back at the back rib, looked just like that bullet. The one that hit at 997 was a little bit longer. It didn't mushroom as far back, but was just as big in diameter.
Really?
Killed that bull.
That is a impressive across-the-board performance from a single bullet at those distances. My gosh.
We shot them at 200, 300, 500, all these different distances, and they always performed.
What did you find the average weight loss was?
It retained between 84 and 96%.
So you can say it's at least an 85 average percentage of weight retention, and that's going to get you all the penetration you really need.
Yeah. Plus you get that little bit of fragmentation of lead up front that creates a great big wound channel initially, big mushroom. They really kill well.
Well, what impresses me about this new 7mm backcountry cartridge is that when I look at the good old 280, standard 280 Remington, it's almost the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a little bit shorter in the neck here, and the shoulder's a little sharper on it.
Yeah.
But as far as powder capacity, it's not that far off.
Really similar. The backcountry cartridge has a little steeper shoulder angle, which I think, it's kind of a modern design thing. Yep. And that shorter neck helps when you're wanting to load really sleek bullets that have long, fine entry noses, like that Berger Elite Hunter, the 195 grainer. I don't think you could fit that in a standard 280 Remington and fit it in a magazine.
Boy, it'd be tough. I mean, you're going to be shoving it so far down in. Let's just push it
Yeah.
up here and see.
And I think the
Keeping the
neck of
tip
your
up there.
case would
Yeah.
probably hang over the curve of that bullet just a
Yeah.
little bit. So shortening that neck was a strategic move to enable it to shoot real high BC bullets. Also, they gave this cartridge a 1 in 8 twist rate.
Yeah, you're going to need that if you want to take advantage of those bullets.
Absolutely crucial.
Yeah. You know, this is really impressive. We're talking about a 21st century cartridge that really does something different.
Yeah.
The highest chamber pressures allowed in cartridges since 1925, as far back as I can go. That's when the 270 Winchester came out with 65,000 psi. To my knowledge, that was a record.
Yeah.
That's kind of
And
established.
at the time, it was kind of groundbreaking, and it's kind of fun to think that that was exactly a century ago.
Yeah, right about
100
that.
years ago.
Yep, 1925. Guess what it is? 2025.
Yep.
So there's where it stood. Roy Weatherby, with all of the pushing the envelope that he did, 65,000 psi was
Yep.
what the Weatherby Magnum cartridges were allowed for your maximum average chamber pressure. And now we're looking at one with the same case design, pretty much as you can see with this cutaway. That's just kind of a standard case, but because it's made out of this special steel, it can take the additional 15,000 psi of pressure, and that, of course, is what gives you your extra velocity.
Yeah. Now, what about rifle strength? Have you talked to the federal guys about how that's shaken out?
That
Will
is
rifles
what-
blow up?
Yeah, exactly, and that is what we always worry about. And everyone says, "Oh my gosh, you're going to blow up your rifle. You need a special steel. Do you need a thicker receiver or barrel?" And it turns out, no, you don't. Because all along, our rifle manufacturers have been proof testing their barrels to withstand pretty much double pressures.
Yeah.
Just to protect themselves and protect us as shooters. Who knows what goes on out here? And if you get a load that's just right on the edge of blowing a barrel up, someday there may be a little bit of a change in the primer or the powder or something, and they get their pressures a little too high, so they make darn sure they're within safe limits. And I've talked to some of these rifle makers, and they say, we will test our 65,000 maximum pressure cartridges in our rifles. We'll push that up to 125,000. Whoa!
In
So
proof test loads.
in their proof test loads, just to make sure that if some idiot hand loads one too high, it's not going to blow his gun up and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So 80,000 now starts like, maybe that's not so high after all. And it turns out all the barrels they've been testing with these higher pressures are just fine with it. So I think it's going to take a while for people to accept that. You know, just the idea that, oh my gosh, I'm going to set off this 80,000. But it apparently is safer. I don't think Federal would be pushing it on the market if it was going to
No.
cause any damage.
No, they wouldn't be risking. I mean, there'd be all kinds of risk if there was any question
yeah.
whether or not this would hold.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think about the recoil? You shot this rifle out here when we did an outdoor video, a shooting video for Ron Spomer Outdoors. Make sure and check that out, folks, because we do a lot of discussion out in the great outdoors, snowy white background, and Ron shoots groups at 100, steel targets out past that. A lot of additional good information there, folks. But what did you think? My main question here is, what did you think of the recoil?
I thought I was shooting a 30-06 or a 280 Ackley improved. And
Yeah.
I expected as much given the cartridge. I thought, well, what's this pressure going to do to change things up? Okay, I've got a little more velocity, getting closer to 7 rem mag velocities, but it was a lightweight rifle too.
Yeah.
You know.
Titanium action.
Yeah.
Carbon fiber stock. Yep.
I knew it went off, but I wasn't crying at the end of it.
Yeah.
You know, it was just
You're
really
saying
no
you're as
different
tough as my daughter Sophie.
Well, pretty close. Maybe not quite that tough, but tough enough.
And what do you hear about barrel life?
Yeah, that is the other question. Most guys go, oh my gosh, 80,000, you're going to just burn out your barrel in 100 or 200 shots. And that's no. It doesn't work that way. It's flame temperature right at the throat. And when all that powder is burning, you know, we'd like to think that it just goes bang, because that's what it sounds like. It happens very quickly. But the powder is progressively burning. So it
Yes.
ignites, it begins pushing not only the bullet, but the powder that's in front of the primer gets pushed down the barrel up distance and continues to burn down the barrel.
Has an eroding effect on the
Yes.
throat from
It's almost
contact.
almost like sandblasting it.
Yeah.
So where your barrel breaks down is not from the friction of the bullet down the rifling and those high pressures. The pressure is pushing in all directions equally. So it's pushing against the back of the cartridge case, the chamber wall, the barrel as it's moving down. the pressure's equal everywhere. Against the base of the bullet, obviously, is where we want it.
Yeah.
That's where it's doing
That's the
its
part that needs to move.
Exactly. So really, all that 80,000 psi is doing for the barrel is trying to stretch it, and if the steels are strong enough and they don't get overly stressed, they don't break, that's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And then your energy is directed into the bullet, down your barrel it goes, and you do not burn your barrel out any faster than any other cartridge shooting pretty much the same quantity and type of powder.
Yeah, probably 55 to 60 grains.
Yeah.
So it's going to be right there with your 270, 30-06,
Exactly.
280 Ackley.
Yep. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know of anyone who's shot 3,000 rounds from a 7mm backcountry yet to see what it did to the barrel, but I would
don't
guess,
either, yeah.
I would guess you'd be right up around that, similar to a 270. as you
Sure,
said.
I would think so as well.
Yeah.
And from the kind of shielded comments that Federal's engineers have mentioned to me is they're getting pretty good barrel life out of it.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep. I assume, I don't know this for certain, but that they'll be using hand loaders, because you can hand load that cartridge.
Yeah, that was surprising.
Take some
when I heard that.
additional steps, from what I understand, to get that steel case resized fully, but you can hand load it. And I assume from, the peaks I've got behind the curtain at Federal, that they're just using slightly faster than typical gunpowders, propellant types, for the capacity of cartridge. Usually you use the slowest burning powder you can to get the most velocity out of that case without exceeding 65,000 psi. But what if you can exceed 65,000 psi?
Yeah.
You stuff that case full of a little bit faster burning powder and suddenly everything's going faster.
Yeah, you have to. And folks, the reason that powders have different burning rates is because of inertia in bullets, really. If you've got a lightweight bullet for caliber, it's easier to get that lightweight bullet started. Think about pushing an empty wheelbarrow. It's pretty easy to get that thing going. And once you've broken the inertia of it standing still, it's real easy to keep it going.
Yeah.
Now, put 300 pounds in that wheelbarrow and get it started. It takes a little more effort, and that's the pressure that's inside of your barrel. So if you have a 280 cartridge and you're shooting a 120 grain bullet, you can use a fast burning powder because your pressure is not going to spike as much because the inertia is easily overcome as you're pushing that, getting that bullet started and engraving it in the rifling and down the barrel. But if you use a fast burning powder and a 175 grain bullet in your 7mm, this is where your pressure starts to spike because it's trying to get that heavy bullet started down the barrel, and then your pressure's going.
And that traditional brass case with bulge,
Yep,
primer pockets that stretch,
enlarge,
and
blows the
sometime-
primer out
yep.
the back, and all those problems. The steel case fixes that.
Yeah.
Pretty nifty. So the cool thing about it is, traditionally, if we wanted to go faster with any given bullet, we had to go fatter, right? You had to have a big case like this, 28
Yeah.
Nosler, more powder. Well, you kept your pressures at 65,000. A lot of people think, well, you've got a big cartridge like that, you're going to have way more pressure in it. Like the 460 Weatherby, oh my God, that must have just, it'd probably have 250,000 psi of pressure in that
It looks
monster.
like it would.
It looks like it, but it has 65,000, the same as the Nosler and all the rest of them. That has been kind of the standard at the upper end of pressure since 1925.
Yeah.
And now things are changing. So you don't have to have all that powder to get the same velocity with the same bullet weight.
And all that powder requires a long barrel to get it all burned efficiently.
Oh,
This doesn't.
doesn't. Yeah,
Yeah.
good point. Faster powder, shorter barrel burns it sooner, so you're getting full efficiency in a 20-inch barrel. You don't have to lug your 28-inch barrel through the woods. I'm miking it.
I had a bunch of numbers printed off and I left them home. But it was showing that a 20-inch barrel, I think we mentioned this earlier, hangs with and in fact exceeds, with factory ammo, most of the 7mm magnums, all of them, PRC, everything, in Federal's 155 grain factory ammo.
Okay.
So that alone, I mean, the fact that you can buy a 270, 280, 30-06 size cartridge that outperforms all 7mm magnums
Wow.
in a 20-inch barrel.
In a 20-inch
Super cool.
barrel.
Now, something I wanted to note to you folks is a friend of ours, Derek Ratliff at Horizon Firearms, has been experimenting with the 7 Backcountry in 16-inch barrels.
16-inch barrels. Whoa.
He showed up to a Colorado elk hunt with one with a suppressor on it. So he's like 22 inches with a 6-inch suppressor. And he was getting little bitty groups and still really impressive velocities. I think he was losing another 100 feet per second. So he was still hanging with, let's say, a 280 Ackley in a 24-inch barrel, 7 Rem Mag in a 24-inch barrel. That realm with a 16-inch barrel.
16-inch barrel, that is crazy.
Isn't that impressive?
Well, that's what really makes this an innovative cartridge that's so much different from where we've been going. All these years it's just been more powder, more powder. Here's something completely different, more pressure, less powder. I like it.
Me too. So, folks, Federal's introducing 5 different factory loads, 155 grain and 170 grain terminal ascents, 175 grain tipped fusion, and 168 grain Barnes LRX, and then the big monster weight of them all, that Berger 195 grain Elite Hunter. Knowing what you know about these various bullets, particularly other than the terminal ascent, so we covered that pretty well. What would you choose each of these different bullets for if you were picking them? Like, what are they going to be really good at in the field, Ron?
You know, each one of them is going to be more than good enough for taking any kind of deer you want, including moose and elk, with the right shot placement, obviously. The more frangible bullets like the Berger, of course, you don't want to be necessarily smacking them right onto the shoulder. You want to pick that behind the shoulder shot where they're going to get inside and they're going to break up and do their thing, and you get a pretty quick demise when they do that. I have long been partial to the Barnes. I just love copper bullets. I love the way they reliably and instantly expand with those petals sticking out. It just seems like they do so much hemorrhaging damage. And I like the idea of copper and not having to fool around with lead, because so many states say, well, you've got to, more and more saying you've got to use copper bullets. So I like to work up a load, have that load for all of my hunting. So if I go someplace where I've got to use it, I've got the bullet I can use.
It's nice to have something that's versatile enough for any game that you might encounter, whether it's a coos deer or a bison.
And the other thing I like about these copper bullets, okay, your weight is a little bit lighter at 168 than the 195s and the 175s and all the rest. So you're going to have a little bit less recoil. Not that that makes a big deal with me, but for some people it does.
Sure.
But the other thing is, even though you're not getting quite the high BC you would for your minimizing your wind deflection, what you get is incredible penetration. Those copper bullets retain 90 to 100% of their weight, and they just penetrate and sail. Just keep going. So I can take a 168 and easily handle my small pronghorn mule deer whitetail, and then go for an elk hunt, go for a moose hunt, not have to switch. Keep the same trajectories, keep the same settings on my scopes or whatever I'm working with. It's just that, it's sort of that one man, one gun, know it well system.
A little off topic, but very closely related. This is a 280 Ackley cartridge right here.
Slide him in close beside.
Yeah, so that's right beside the 7 Backcountry, and this cartridge is loaded with 150 grain Barnes tip triple shock. That came out before the LRX, and that load was developed for my first 280 Ackley rifle. And I had back-to-back hunts for elk in Colorado and pronghorn in the southern edge of Montana. I went on the pronghorn hunt first and took a shot at about 200 yards on a pronghorn facing me, hit him right at the base of the throat, and we literally recovered the perfectly shaped bullet next to his tail.
Yeah, I believe it.
And that pronghorn just went on his chin, right?
Yep.
Dead right there. Beautiful penetration. About 5 days later, I didn't even get to go home in between. I was sitting across a canyon in 1.5 feet of snow, 45-degree slopes on both sides, and a kind of a gnarly, non-typical-ish bull, a 4x6 bull, was feeding alone. This was late season, in a little pocket on the far side, and we had about 20 minutes of daylight left. It was take the shot or leave it, 519 yards. I got very steady with the use of a crotch in a tree and backpacking the whole works, not a breath of wind. Put my bullet on the X on this broadside bull, and he took 2 jumps and was gone into a little patch of oak brush. Well, we marked it good visually and hiked over there, got into the spot, and found where I'd shot him and looked, and he was laying right there, stone dead. Shot through and through, just through like the back third of his shoulder, right where I was aiming. So when you talk about, one bullet that'll do everything, that was my first choice for that.
See, that's how I got started with the 280 AI. My first load was 150 grain original X
Okay.
Sheep at 350, moose at 150, elk whitetail, you name it. That 150 grain bullet took care of everything. I never had a loss. I never had a cripple animal. It was just amazing. And it sold me, and I've been working with them ever since. And of course now with the new versions, the LRX and the TTSX and all, they're better than ever.
So it's interesting to note, Barnes developed a bullet for the 7PRC. Last year, 160 grain bullet with a really long, sleek ogive and a bigger polymer tip that's been re-engineered through the use of Doppler radar and computer engineering and all this studying they're doing on curves. They've optimized the tip, they've optimized the front shape of the shank, and it's too long, just like we were talking about with that burger bullet, to fit in most conventional cartridges without the mouth hanging over the curve of the bullet.
Okay.
But I think with the length of the neck on that 7 Backcountry that a guy could hand load it in there.
Short neck will make the
Perhaps
difference,
Federal will generate a load for that once Barnes is caught up with its own demand, right? Everybody wants these bullets for the 7PRC. Wow. They're insanely accurate. I tested them in a really good custom rifle of mine and shot 3 consecutive 5-shot groups at 100 yards, lightweight titanium action. The average was .46.
That's an average I could live with.
It was unbelievable. Like, that's the sort of thing you get out of, 3 months of tuning a fine hand load to a heavy barreled rifle, let alone a lightweight. So that 160 is my favorite of all the monometal bullets currently in a 7mm, and I think it would fit in that 7 Backcountry.
Yeah, I think that would. I like the sound of that. I've always liked 160 grain in this 280 Ackley or 7-rem mag. It's kind of the compromise between the 150s and 175s.
Yeah.
And with what you're describing here, it sounds like your BCs are going to be pretty high for it.
Mid-6s with a monometal. Really good, yeah. Well, Ron, do you think you need one of these?
I don't need one, but what's need got to do with it?
How bad do you want one?
Now you're talking my language.
If your wife, folks, or your spouse, I should say, asks if you really need another rifle, well, find something they're really into, whether it's shoes or saddles. And so, do you really need another? Yeah, right. Have to be a
shoes or saddles. That spreads it out.
My wife loves both. I confess I kind of like both. I'm not partial to barefoot, so.
Depends on which bear's foot we're talking about.
The bigger the better when we're talking about bear's feet. Yeah. Would you use this on a grizzly, Ron?
Absolutely. No hesitation.
And how about a coastal brown bear?
Yeah, if you paid me.
Or maybe if you had a good outfitter with a bigger gun behind.
Somebody backing me up with a 416 or Rigby or something like that. No, with that right bullet, in a hunting situation, I wouldn't be my first pick for stopping him if he's charging me.
Sure.
But even then, if you got the kind of penetration you get from this bullet, the power and the energy is never going to be enough in a hand-fired rifle to stop anything unless you hit them in the central nervous system. We've seen way too many animals get shot and shot and shot and shot. And they keep coming with 500 grain bullets out of Big Nitro Express and whatnot all.
Sure.
So it's the penetration that's needed to reach the vitals, and that little bullet's going to do it. But it wouldn't be my first pick, but I would certainly use it. I wouldn't say, yeah, send me out there, I'll watch this, but
don't maybe pick it as the right tool to follow up a wounded bear with.
Exactly.
If you had alternates, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Any final thoughts for our listeners today, Ron?
Well, I really do think that this has the potential to set a whole new dynamic, a whole new paradigm shift, call it, in cartridges. For so long now we've been saying, how can we make them go faster and shoot flatter and drift less in the wind and be more accurate? And we've used just about every trick in the book.
All small refinements.
Yep, tiny little refinements for which a lot of people say, what a waste of time, this doesn't do anything that the old ones don't do. And from a hunting perspective, they're probably right. But nonetheless, we're always trying for a better mousetrap, more perfection, et cetera, et cetera. But this is a whole new direction.
Yeah.
Increasing that chamber pressure to gain instead of adding more powder and a bigger cartridge and all the rest of it, I think is the wave of the future. And if they've developed a steel that now enables an ordinary 30-06 sized case to perform like the Super Magnum giant fat cases do, with less powder, less recoil. Why not?
Shorter barrels, more gun capacity.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be looking for a bunch of new steel cartridges in familiar platforms. I mean, why not use that same steel case to make a steel 308 that can take 80,000 psi?
Yeah, can you imagine what you could do with that?
Ooh.
I don't know if you could ever push like a 200 grain bullet like a 300 Win Mag can, because you don't have the head height or the case capacity to be protruding so far.
Yeah, and a short action and all the concerns.
But imagine a 165 grain AccuBond or partition pushed at 3,200 feet per second.
You've got a 300 Win Mag 308, so to speak, huh?
That could be pretty cool.
Yeah, and think about the varmint cartridges, 22 250s and that sort of thing.
Oh, that's a thought.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of thoughts out there, folks. I would be watching for it, though. I just cannot imagine if this works as well as you've discovered it works already, and with the simple potential when you look at it and you study it and you think about it, it's like, well, you guys can do this with anything. Your barrels can handle it, the receivers can handle it, the rifles can handle it. You just need that particular case, find the powder that works the best with the bullet you want, and bingo.
Yep, learn the new reloading process with a couple extra steps.
That I'm really interested in. They said that they're going to have that data for me here fairly soon, so as soon as we get it, we'll start talking about it.
So I heard that they've gotten 3 reloads out of all the cases they've tried without issues, and they've had 80% case survival rate through 6 reloads. But at that point, about 20% of them, nearly 20%, have split necks from resizing and contracting that steel. It's not going to be quite as malleable as brass, but still, 80% case survival at 6 reloads, you're going to get a lot of pretty useful life out of that case. Yeah. So, folks, it really boils down to this. This is a rifle so far that I've shot many, many sub-inch groups with at 100 yards. I've shot it to 600 yards on steel, deer vital size plates with incredible effectiveness. I don't typically shoot that far on game. I like keeping it inside 450 yards maximum if I can, but it gives you a lot of confidence when you shoot, a 10-inch gong to 600 yards every time you try it, every different 100-yard interval. That's really confidence building, right?
Oh, yeah.
And my little girl went and shot a great big bear with the cartridge. That's pretty confidence inspiring too.
Yeah, sure would be.
All right. Well, folks, hit us with questions. Either get on Ron Spomer Outdoors, follow his channel, follow his podcast, and hit him with questions, because he's always got good answers, and
or wrong answers, and then you can correct me.
Or funny answers, which are my favorites. Anyway, or ping me on patreon.com/backcountry, or if you want a short answer typed with my thumbs on Instagram. Would love to hear from you. Try and answer questions as well as I can. Thanks for coming on the show again, Ron.
I always enjoy it, Joseph.
I love it. I love visiting with you. It's so much fun, and I always get great feedback from our listeners and viewers. So you are undoubtedly the favorite guest that ever appears on the Backcountry Hunting Podcast.
I have to pay him to say that, but thanks anyway.
He pays me with his time, about 45 minutes of it right now.
No, it's always a pleasure to be with you, Joseph. Really appreciate it.
Likewise, my friend. I'm here with Ron Spomer, and we will see you in the backcountry.
Unless you see us first.
And run away.